Let's talk about Deontay Wilder and Dominic Breazeale this weekend. I was at that fight, and let me just say,
didn't last an hour and 45 minutes.
No. Slightly over a minute 45. But that was, before we get into the fight, I have to tell you, the crowd at the Barclays Center, I've been to a lot of fights. I was at Canelo Jacobs last week. The crowd in Brooklyn was unbelievable. Man, they were so passionate. They were awesome. There was no real bullshit. It was like nice people. Like everyone was passionate, but and going crazy, but not like bad behavior, let's say. But let's get into the fight. There wasn't really much to discuss. I mean, totally one-sided affair, and I'm curious to hear what your takes were, because the one thing that seemed obvious to me is that Breazeale, I don't want to say he seemed scared, but I don't even know what he was doing. He was pawing out there with the jab. He was pawing out there with the jab, almost waiting to get hit. He might have thrown two punches that were slightly behind the head in a clinch. It just didn't. And I like Dominic Breazeale. I hate to say this, but he was.
I had a prediction before that fight.
And that's right. And you talked about it on the show, and you sent out a tweet saying that Dominic Breazeale better keep that left hand up, and exactly the way you described it.
I actually in some places said that he's going to get knocked out one round, but I definitely said he's going to get knocked out early. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't a hard thing to say. I'm not saying that. That doesn't exactly make me the amazing Kreska.
The way you phrased it happened is exactly the way it happened. You could see it on Twitter, and people jumped on it.
What made me even more sure was, on top of everything else, that I felt that I could make that prediction because of what I know and what I think I know. My judgments through this game for 40 years. And as an analyst, at ringside for 20 years doing Friday night fights and whatever else with ESPN, on top of that, what really crystallized it for me was when they were in the ring, Breazeale was dry. Mm-hmm. And I, with my buddy and the manager that puts this all together, Rob Moore, who does a great job, I was able to tweet. I was able to tweet, and I saw, there it is, and just before it started, this was like right at the beginning of, as the bell was about to ring, or ringing, I said this because he looked dry, and when you're dry, he already had enough problems going in because he doesn't know how to get away from punches. His defense isn't good. He's too easy to hit. Oh, yeah. It's just too easy to hit. And when you're too easy to hit, that's not good in boxing. No, it's not good. No. It's not good. It kind of be like trying to be a Vogue model with too much acne. It's just not good. You know what I mean? It doesn't work well. And so he, on top of that, he goes in there cold. And I'm looking at him, and I told Rob to send this out because he's not warmed up. And he already has enough problems, and this is just going to magnify his problem because by not being warmed up, you're more susceptible to getting caught early in a fight. And so that was part of it. And the other thing is I'm going to go into it a little bit, but there's no excuse, really, for what happened. And I'll tell you why. And then people are going to be surprised. They're going to say, Teddy, you just said that you knew it was going to be Yeah, I get it. I knew that only one guy was going to win. I get all that stuff. But even with that, there's no excuse for it to go the way it went. I'll tell you why. If you're a boxer and you're fighting a guy who you know his most dangerous weapon is his right hand, you also know that before the right hand, I always used to say it on ESPN, that the left hand is the table setter, and then you eat with the right hand. Mm-hmm. The right hand goes and eats, but the table gets set by the left. So if you don't know anything else, the guy's got a good right hand, the table set is the left. All you have to do from the trainer to the fighter is, and there's a lot more to be done than this. Yeah. But one thing, when you see the shadow, see the shadow? Yeah. The shadow of a left hand. When you see the semblance of a left hand, when you feel a left hand, move your freaking head. Soon as you feel this left hand, soon as you feel it, move your head. Because the right hand's coming. Don't stand there. And that's the one thing. I know no one else is going to put notice to that until maybe now. But like, they're going to say, but I get it. He set it up. He landed the right hand. He's the best puncher in boxing. I've been saying that, Wilder being he. I've been saying that for years. Him and Adonis Stevenson were the two hardest punchers in boxing. Adonis Stevenson had a better delivery system because he was better technically. But for one punch, Wilder's the best puncher in boxing. So I get it. But still, as a professional, you have to go in there prepared. And I don't care what your shortcomings are. In that one area, you know what his weapon is, his great weapon is, what his great strength is. You know what he's going to beat you with if he beats you. Don't make it that easy. You get hit with a jab, move your head. Listen, I would rather think that as a trainer, I could teach him not to get hit the jab too. That's even better.
Yeah.
But I'm making it simple. I'm making it painting with numbers. I'm not making it Rembrandt stuff.
Yeah.
I'm making it simple, or Picasso, or whatever you like. But the jab touches you. As soon as it touches you, move your head. As soon as it touches, move your head because you know what's coming. You know what's coming. You know what it would be like? It'd be like robbing a bank. And a lot of people are going to say, you use that analogy a lot, Teddy. You used to rob a bank. No. I was an idiot as a kid. I did a few stupid things, but I never robbed a bank. But I understand the concept. The concept is this. If you're robbing a bank or whatever, you're doing something that's not good, right? And we don't condone doing anything that's not good. But just for an example, and you hear police sirens, you might want to get out of the bank. You might want to get out of the bank. So you're fighting a guy who's got a deadly right hand. You feel a jab. You might want to get out of the bank.
Back to your point of him being dry, I almost wonder, it looked to me like he was overwhelmed by the moment, because I noticed even when he, they make the B-side guy go out first, obviously they kept him waiting. They played this like big dramatic entry music for Wilder, whatever, entertainment. And I noticed that Breazeale wasn't throwing jabs. He was hopping around a little, but he wasn't staying loose and like throwing punches, combinations. He was just kind of standing there looking around, almost caught up in the moment.
That's a good point. That's a good point. Like the deer in the headlight.
That's
like
what he looked
frozen.
like. Yeah.
The fear overtook him.
And all I could think was at least throw some punches, move around, dude. You're going to be fighting in like 20 minutes.
Almost like waiting for the execution.
Yes, that's what it looked like.
Like knowing what's going to happen. Like being, what's the word? Being resigned.
Yes, that's what it looked like. And that's what the effort looked like in the first round,
like I said. You're my spelling coach. You're my vocabulary coach. Was that the correct?
He resigned, resigned to take that loss.
Yes.
He threw that jab out there so lazy. I was disappointed, just like you. I mean, Wilder obviously has so much power, but geez, like, can you give a little resistance? There was no resistance. You know what's coming? Boom, 2.5 minutes and you catch it.
I never saw this Breazeale. He's a big guy. He was a college football player. He was a guy that played Division I ball, but not really not Alabama Division I.
No, right.
And 2 years. Nothing great, but he was a quarterback, big guy. And obviously he wasn't a scrambling quarterback, he was a guy who stood in the pocket, and unfortunately the pocket collapsed on him. But he was 6'7", big guy, football player. And, he went into this business, and there's obviously a learning curve. There's a development throughout it. I never saw any of that. And now, don't get me wrong. I mean, he fought a bunch of fights, and he won certain fights. He lost one to Joshua when he stepped up, and he got dropped in fights with lesser guys, but he got off. He showed heart, and he won, and he got to this point. But I never saw the development, football player or not football player, bicyclist or not bicyclist, basketball player, not basketball player, baker, not baker, carpenter before he was a fighter, not carpenter. I don't care. But now you're a fighter. And the one thing I never saw any teaching or signs that there was teaching of or progression was where just the basic head movement.
Yeah. There was nothing.
Just like, really, I never saw any of that progression. He beat guys because he was matched right. He had heart. He physically beat them. But I never saw along the way. And I get where you're coming from. I get it. He's coming from not having been a fighter who started when he was 12 and have 200 amateur fight. I get all that. But I still want to see some progression because now you are a fighter. Mm-hmm. But the one thing I will say, an explanation for that, when you take a guy from another place, in this case, football player starting late in boxing, you start late in boxing. It could be in anything, but we're talking about boxing. And you start late, and you're making that transition from one sport to another. The one thing that is the easiest to form is the offensive side of it. And I did a tweet on that too, that Rob also sent out before the fight, explaining why I thought it was going to be an early night for Mr. Breazeale. See, when you start towards becoming a fighter, the offensive side is the easiest side to get a handle on, because I could take a kid off the street and I'll make him throw punches. Yeah. But I won't be able to make him get away from punches so easy. But I'll get him in a 2-minute session and put him in and he'll throw punches. Yeah. Might be for about 14 seconds. But getting away, the concept of getting away, that's a little different. Mm-hmm. And there's a reason for that. Part of it is the teaching, the mechanics. I get it. But it's a natural reaction to fear to throw punches. See, a lot of people, when they hear that word, they say, wow, that's interesting, because in boxing, most people stay away from that because they think that fighters were born devoid of that. No, they weren't. They were born with it, like everyone else. They learned how to control it. And that's where the shortcoming shows itself, as not having had that background as a boxer to get used to that environment, to get versed in that climate, so to speak, of dealing with fear, where they haven't had the practice of that, the conditioning of that, the training of that, the learning of that, the getting comfortable with that, the understanding what that is, what that feeling is, and that you can control it. It doesn't have to control you. You don't have to get in the ring and be like a deer in the sun, waiting to get executed. Mm-hmm. You learn that when you're 12 and you go through that progression. So what I'm saying is that I knew he was going to get knocked out early, because that transition, that learning part, development part that's so important never took place with the defensive end of it. Because the offensive end, again, you're afraid, you throw punches. They might not be great punches, or you might not keep them up too long, but you throw. You direct your fear through offense. Mm-hmm. But to have a defensive dimension to you is a whole different thing. Now, you can't direct your fear with defense. You can't direct your fear, the way you do with offense, where you lash out at what scares you, even if it's only for a moment and it's erratic. You still lash out. There's no lashing out in defense. Defense means defense, not offense, not initiating. It means someone else is initiating and you have to handle it. So it means control. It means being able to come to terms with your fear. Instead of pushing your fear aside and using your fear in an offensive manner, sort of obliterating your fear, sort of ignoring your fear for a moment, or maybe burning your fear, accelerating your fear with the punches. In other words, dumping gasoline on the fire of fear, because fear is a fire. Dumping gasoline on that fire and accelerating it by just letting the fire burn real quick until it burns out. Mm-hmm. And on the defensive side, you got to do the opposite. You have to understand your fear. You have to embrace your fear. You have to become friends with your fear. Yeah, friends with your fear. You have to understand your fear. You have to acknowledge your fear. And you have to ultimately live with your fear and control your fear. And that takes the things that you don't have when you have a short period of learning from one sport to another. You have to get comfortable in that uncomfortable environment, in that uncomfortable place. And you have to get to where you take that fear and you say, I'm going to control it. Because if it's uncontrolled, rather than lashing out when it's uncontrolled in the offense where it can be productive, now when it's uncontrolled with the defense, you know what happens? You get a guy pulling away, running away from what the fear is. You run away from it. You run away, you get hit. Or you freeze. You freeze, you get hit.
Yep.
You know, you close your eyes. You just cover up. You submit. And see, that is the byproduct of connected to fear and the defensive end of it. That's the byproduct of it is that not understood, not controlled, not polished in that area, you know, not trained in that area, developed in that area, that you just get overcome by it.
Yeah.
And that's what happened to Breazeale, is that he never had a chance.
No.
Because that's why he never had a chance though. It wasn't just because of the power of Wilder. It was because I don't care if Wilder threw punches hard or not, they were always going to land because he never learned the defensive component of this game. The most important part of it. Because he didn't have help in that area enough, and he didn't have time and development, the true development it takes in that area to conquer that area, to master that area. It's one thing, again, you're afraid, I'll throw punches, but you're afraid, now you gotta be controlled, you gotta be able to understand what it is, and you gotta be able to stay right in there, right in that pocket, and you gotta be able to slip the punch. You got like a baseball player. You know, a baseball player, yeah, he'll swing the bat, he won't hit nothing. But to become good, he's gotta be able to be calm enough to wait till the ball gets just to the right place. See, that's the part of it people don't understand. So the ball gets just to the right place, and it shows itself where it's going to go. It's going to curve, it's going to sink, or it's going to flatline, and then bang, and then get around. That takes calmness. That takes control over your emotions, over your anxiety, over your fear. And when to be able to have the defensive part, which you can't be a fighter at that level if you don't have some defensive dimension to you. You can't.
Yeah.
You have to be, again, you have to be able to take that fear, control it, look it in the eye, handle it, and be able to use it.
Yeah.
Be sharp, be alert, but don't let it control you.
Yeah.
And that is something that guys making the transition never quite get.
Yeah.